our rank number 3, year 4, August 2023 of August 2024. And for those of you wondering why we've got the August to August is because Roman Reigns made his comeback at SummerSlam 2020. So that's the reason why we're kind of going from August to each August. So now this is where things I think are going to get very interesting. So with the ranking system, I voted for year number 4 to be at number 3. Aaron, you voted for the following year that we're going to talk about to be at number at this part. But we had to do a social media tiebreaker, and what I found very interesting is that year 4 won to basically go higher on this list through my social media post on Facebook. And Facebook, it was a tie, so I gave it a point as well. On Twitter, it did win, but not by a landslide. It was like only just 10% more versus the upcoming year that we're going to be talking about, when that won via Instagram, TikTok, and my YouTube. Man, that thing blew it out of the water. So what that tells me about year number 4 is that there are definitely some polarizing results in terms of how fans are maybe feeling about it. Me personally, I feel that year number 4 has probably the lowest part of the bloodline, and yet for particular final boss reasons, it has the highest point. So how do I balance that out? I'll go more in depth with my thoughts in a moment here, but Aaron, since you felt that year number 4 is rank number 2, I'm going to let you go first on this. So you go ahead and let us know why you feel year 4 should be higher on this list.
All right, I will definitely give you my thoughts on it. Year 4, like you said, a bit polarizing. I think maybe some people are lowering its position because of the last couple of months that Roman Reigns was gone after WrestleMania 40. It did slow down a little bit, the Solo Sikoa version of the Bloodline. We were all waiting for Roman Reigns to make his return, and it did feel like it was dragging on a little bit, but it's all part of the big picture, and you have to look at what's to come with that. But to me, there were 2 reasons why I went a different way than this official ranking. To me, this last year, the Bloodline, I mean, this had The Rock involved, and The Rock, to me, very heavily weighs into it. I mean, you had that press conference in Las Vegas, The Rock getting involved with Cody Rhodes and Roman Reigns' storyline, some of the most compelling television in WWE in years. And that episode of Monday Night Raw where The Rock attacked Cody Rhodes in the parking lot, I mean, I thought that was one of the best Raw segments in a very long time, maybe going back to the Attitude Era. I mean, that was such an awesome segment. The Rock was must-see television. You were absolutely tuning in to see The Rock and what he was going to say and where this was going to go next. And then, of course, it was a beginning of a downswing for the Bloodline. I mean, it was already starting to go downhill in 2023, but 2024, Roman Reigns obviously loses the title. So maybe some people ranked this a little bit lower because it contained moments where the Bloodline were in a losing position as opposed to a winning position. But still, a lot of compelling television, especially in the early part of 2024. And the end of the year, I could also see maybe bringing it down a little bit. I felt like Jimmy Uso turning against Jey, that whole fallout, that took a little bit of time to develop because Jey went over to Monday Night Raw and was doing the stuff over there for a while, and then they finally had the match at WrestleMania. And some fans were not happy with that WrestleMania match. They were disappointed with that one, although I liked the match more than some of the critics did. But you had some great segments and a lot of memorable moments with Roman Reigns. You kind of had a filler match at the Royal Rumble, throwing in LA Knight and AJ Styles and all those guys in there. It was just to kill time until WrestleMania. So it's like by that point, and even before that, Roman Reigns is not losing the title until WrestleMania. So to me, that kind of took away from some of his title defenses. You knew, okay, Roman's retaining. Let's just get to WrestleMania. So I can see people knocking that, but to me, The Rock was really the difference maker. And the other thing too, as much as I liked the first year of the Bloodline, it was also without fans, and to me that hurt it a little bit. Definitely looking back on it, the Thunderdome, it was very important because I feel like it made WWE watchable during the pandemic. Roman Reigns turning heel, and the intrigue in that, the stuff they had to come up with because there were no fans, that was compelling. And to me, that's what made WWE watchable during that time. And there was really not a whole lot. It was rough for me, maybe for others too, to really get invested in some of those pandemic shows with no fans. Eventually, I kind of got used to it, but I was still waiting for the fans to come back and get involved and be part of the show again. I remember some great segments with Roman Reigns and Jey Uso, the whole start of that, where Jey Uso went from being just, what was he, a host of a segment with like 10 other people. I forgot what it was exactly, but you know what I'm talking about. It was during one of those performance center shows where, he's doing absolutely nothing. And then next thing you know, I think it was a battle royal. Correct me if I'm wrong. He won a match to get the championship opportunity at Roman Reigns. And that's when it really started to reach a next level. And I remember Roman Reigns just yelling at Jey Uso. He beat him up, and then he's just holding the title in his face. And I thought it was such a great segment. And to me, that was really one of the most compelling things that WWE had done in many years. After Roman Reigns was John Cena 2.0, all of a sudden he had developed his own identity. And for the first time, you were like, man, this guy's a badass. Before it's suffering succotash and tater tots. And you just
I forgot about that one.
I know it's just something as an adult male, you really cannot get behind. But when you got Roman Reigns there saying, I'm the head of the table, he's the alpha male, all of a sudden this guy's pretty cool. So I definitely can see the argument for the first year being higher than the most recent year. But I consider the fans, and I consider The Rock's involvement, and I can definitely understand them being close. Like, to me, it's neck and neck between these 2 years. And like I said, no bad year of the Bloodline. I think they're both great, but I think I would still go with the year that includes The Rock, just because of the fans being involved. But if the first year had Roman Reigns, who knows if it would have been as successful as it was. Part of it was the fact that they had to rely more on dialogue in the ring because you didn't have the fans in attendance. Like, you think of the Hell in a Cell match with Roman Reigns and Jey, all the talking back and forth, and you had Jimmy out there. That stuff might not have played over as well with fans in attendance. And because they were able to do that and it worked, they realized, okay, we can do more of this later down the line with the guys in the ring, and they can talk and do all that stuff. But I felt like the fact that they were able to do this in the pandemic actually helped WWE as far as moving the stories along and being able to tell the stories in different ways. I'm torn between them. I'm sticking to what I went with, but I could see the argument either way.
Well, very well said. Yeah, I figured that would probably be what it would come down to for me as well. You know what? Hold on. Let me figure. I forgot to put my background music on here. Let me put it down to 6.
Careful about the YouTube copyright, people.
Oh yeah, I'm using copyright free music. Basically, yeah. Would have loved to use some Roman Reigns theme music, but obviously, right, yeah. But yeah. I was gonna say though, just to go on everything what you're saying, absolutely. When I said the lowest part for year 4, for me, the thing that it comes down to is we were there at SummerSlam 2023 as well. That whole period where Jey Uso he left the Bloodline and he went on to do his thing. Like, I think the stuff that they did with Jey Uso throughout the fall and the momentum he gained and the whole music, it's just me, Uso, and doing the whole eating and everything, that was great stuff. But that whole fall 2024 or 2023 period, man, I kind of felt it was the lowest point in terms of being compelling TV for the Bloodline, because you had Jimmy Uso, who also had a really great theme song talking about how he's a king, born a king, and he's putting his family in the past, and he does the exact opposite of everything that his lyrics say, and he's trying to get back in the Bloodline, and they kind of turned him into a little bit of a comedy character, which was entertaining. I thought Jimmy Uso's responses, like, I think there's one time where Roman says, "When I'm gone," he says, "I need the new tribal chief to step forward," and Jimmy Uso's like, and he's like, "Solo," and Jimmy's like, man,
Yeah.
like, I thought that was, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, let me add something. Definitely, Jimmy was kind of booked poorly, and we'll see what happens when he comes back. I also wanted to mention Solo Sikoa. They did a great angle with him at Crown Jewel, beating John Cena. I mean, that was huge. But look at the follow-up to it. Like, they had him. How many matches did he lose after that? Like, why did they book it that way? Especially if they had this all planned out. Like, okay, eventually Solo is going to be trying to take over. Like, they did such a good job protecting Solo, like, the first year and up to when he beat John Cena. But after that, he just went on a losing streak. And I guess house shows don't count or whatever. But, I mean, they should have protected him at the house shows too. Like, Solo should not have been losing at all after beating John Cena. So I would say that's a negative. If I had to come up with a negative for the Bloodline, I would say Solo going on that losing streak after beating John Cena.
Absolutely, yeah. That's another point in the fall, and that should be treated. That should be protected. When you beat John Cena, that should mean something. Not by having him lose. And I think they did almost the same thing with Austin Theory and stuff. Yeah. And it's like, how do you have Cena lose and you don't follow up with it?
Right.
That part, yeah. And getting what you were saying, Aaron, that's my thing about it. Jey Uso had such a fantastic fall, really building him up as to be a top baby face. And I felt like this is good. I'm like, especially if Roman's going to be gone, we can tell there's a compelling story to tell of maybe a power struggle between Solo and Jimmy Uso, and maybe we'll get to Jimmy Uso becoming a more like a dominant heel, just getting that more serious push, because I thought that was what they were doing. They separate these two so that when they get to the big match at WrestleMania, Jimmy and Jay both would go ahead and have this we got the top baby face here and a top heel here, but instead it just felt really low. And I think that's one of my biggest things going in that WrestleMania 40 match is Jay and Jimmy Uso. I think they took way too long to really get going. Like, it felt like only just a few weeks before WrestleMania 40 that now Jimmy Uso and Jay are finally starting to interact. Before a couple of months, I think he had cost him the tag titles a couple of times, but yeah. And in the match itself at WrestleMania 40 with Jay and Jimmy, I liked it from a story standpoint, so I still stand with that as I put it in my ranking and my review. I like the story aspect of it, but would have loved to see some more variety outside of just spamming super kicks back and forth. I know their time got cut and everything, but I wouldn't mind if maybe in year 5 we get one more Jimmy and Jay match with like a stipulation of no holds barred or something, and just let those guys get the time they need to go out there, and then that's where they bury the hatchet. So that we'll see what that happens in year 5. But yeah, man, fantastic year for Jey Uso. This really showed that he can be on his own. Jimmy Uso, like I said, I wish they would have done more. And then Paul Heyman, man, I don't know about you. Did you enjoy every week Paul Heyman take his phone, call Roman Reigns? And that's literally, they had him doing week in and week out, month after month after month. And I love Paul Heyman. His delivery is great as always, but I'm like, there's got to be something here. And like you said, Aaron, maybe they already knew The Rock was coming in and what direction it were coming. But it felt a lot like through that fall period that they were kind of almost just dragging their feet until they get to The Rock. And as fans, you don't never want to feel like that, because as we'll see when we get to another particular year at our number 1 spot, when Roman wasn't around, boy, did they sure find ways to make the story still compelling. So that's to me was one thing that had to drag number 4 down a lot. But then we get to January and The Rock shows up, and there was a whole bunch of stuff that went on as we seen from that point to WrestleMania. But I dare say January to WrestleMania and the whole build-up and everything they did with The Rock and Cody and Seth and Roman was the absolute best part of the Bloodline. if we were to break it up not by year and by arcs, and I just take that WrestleMania 40 arc, I might put that right there at the top of the list, because The Rock coming back and you know, them pivoting it and going to the what was it, the new heel persona. We got to see The Rock basically go back to some of his old classics and bring back the music from 2003, dressing like 1999 corporate rock, and he's the final boss. Fantastic stuff. Loved every bit of it. It was so compelling. Like, who could ever forget when The Rock basically goes like, "If you smell," and then we get that shot of Roman Reigns with his arm, and then they have the camera pan up, and Rock's like, "What the?" And Roman's like, "Before you do your catchphrase, I need to make sure you do something for me. I need you to acknowledge me." And the crowd's like, "Oh," I'm like, that was compelling. And The Rock says, "I acknowledge you, my cousin Roman Reigns," and the fans booed. And just us wondering, like, little things like, when The Rock does this, could that mean something? And then he would go back and do that. Like, that was great stuff, man. Cody Rhodes and The Rock, the beatdown he did at WrestleMania. I mean, a couple of Raws before WrestleMania in Chicago, great stuff. And then Roman, when Rock would take the belt out and whoop him and stuff, and how they factor Seth Rollins into it, that was great stuff. And I dare say, once again, to me, they put on arguably the one of, if not the greatest, maybe one of the greatest main events in WrestleMania history. That Bloodline Rules 2, and how they factored what was it, the night before, from Rock and Roman winning and beating Cody and Seth, which was a fantastic main event, into that next one. And just the blow off. I mean, if that would have been the end of the Bloodline story, that was a perfect storybook ending. But obviously they had more. That was great. And then basically, yeah, just to go through some of the matches here. Like you said, the Roman Reigns LA Knight. It's cool to see they put LA Knight in the main event, but I felt like it was too soon. You knew Roman wasn't losing that title at all, so I'm like, I wouldn't put LA Knight anywhere near him. So they did that. And then of course we got Jimmy and Jay in the Royal Rumble, which kind of touched on that one already. The Fatal 4-Way Roman Reigns. At this point, I think Roman Reigns' title reign, it kind of reached its peak of everything you could do with it. So I see that there. And then, like I said, those WrestleMania 40 main events were good. So then it's what we do after we get to WrestleMania 40. That's when the story really starts to pick up again, because Jimmy Uso is excommunicated by Solo, and we get the debut of Tama Tonga, thus making because Solo's the new role of the new tribal chief, and Paul Heyman is terrified. I was so hyped for the story, because we knew Roman wasn't probably coming back until SummerSlam, but I'm like, this is what they needed, because Solo Sikoa, putting aside them having him lose so much, Solo Sikoa at that point definitely needed, I felt like, let him talk more, let him, get into a bigger role, and I'm glad that they finally took that direction. That Backlash France match was hot, because the audience was really hot for it. The Bloodline with Solo Sikoa and Tama against KO and Randy Orton, and then at the end we got Camacho returning under his New Japan Pro Wrestling name, Tama Loa, and man, we thought it was going to be Jacob Fatu, so we was like, okay, how many new Bloodline members are they doing? So we got the Sons of Haku, aka Gorillas of Destiny, now part of the Bloodline, and oh man, who could ever forget the debut of Jacob Fatu on the June 21st edition 2024 SmackDown? Because Jacob Fatu, I heard a lot about this guy from other content creators and podcasters, and I checked out some of his stuff in MLW, and just seeing his presence when he talks, I'm like, man, like, he's got like his catchphrase, he's like, "Oh, dog walk you." I'm like, oh dang, this guy's got it. He came in like a beast, and then the following week they had him they had the whole amazing segment. Paul Heyman, who was fantastic in this segment, he gets that moment where Solo goes like, "Okay, I need you to acknowledge me, Paul," and he goes like, "Solo, I love you, and I acknowledge that you are not my tribal chief." And huge ovation pop, like stone cold attitude era level of pop. And Paul knew what was coming, and boom, Solo and all three of them, all three of them beat up Paul Heyman and give him a power bomb through the table, showing Paul, even at his age, not being an active competitor, still willing to get this storyline over. That was compelling, and they really started heating things up in the summer. They had Cody Rhodes get defeated by Solo in that 6-man tag match at Money in the Bank 2024. So it really felt like, okay, this Bloodline's on the rise. Just only it would have felt a little bit stronger had they been ranking up win after win with Solo.
Right.
And of course, this leads to SummerSlam 2024 recently, which, like I said, I felt Cody Rhodes and Solo Sikoa's chemistry wasn't as good as Roman Reigns. But when Roman Reigns came out to his WrestleMania 41 theme and that place erupted, and like I said, he comes in, Superman punch, spear, and you could feel the ooh, ah, to the soul. It's like, man, look where we were at SummerSlam 2020, Roman coming back as a heel, and now it comes full circle around as a babyface. Man, and the stuff they did in a couple of weeks, like Roman Reigns beating up Solo and Tama Tonga and Tama Loa all by themselves, by itself, man, that was fantastic. That took me back almost like the Attitude Era when Stone Cold would come out and start whooping the Ministry and everything.
Yeah.
And then most recently, we end year number 4, where it's the same thing. Roman basically just going ham on all on Solo and Tama. And man, what I really think it needs to be very appreciated about Roman Reigns' storytelling is he knows how to take his time and make the fans wait. He picks up the Ula Fala and he's slowly putting it on. And once he puts it right over his neck, man, the audience erupts. And then Jacob Fatu comes in, whoops Roman Reigns with a few moves, and that's it. And I still laugh at it. At the end, Solo and Tama come up there and start standing up like they did something. What did you guys do in the storyline other than get whooped by one man for 2 weeks straight? If I'm Jacob Fatu in the storyline, I'm taking the Ula Fala. I'm putting it on. I'm saying you acknowledge me. And I'm like, yeah, you did in one move what you acknowledged. It's like not to get too much on a tangent. They had the Judgment Day where Liv Morgan beat up Rhea Ripley all by herself, and then her other 4 male companions all had to gang up on Damian Priest. And I'm like, Liv Morgan looks more impressive. She took out one woman by herself, where it took 4 dudes to take out Damian Priest. So it kind of goes into the same thing here with all that. So I thought, man, year 4, it had its ups and downs. Some of those downs I had to put it at number 3, but man, just looking at it, there was a lot of good stuff, and I'm glad that they moved things along for it. So I think it does set up things nicely for year 5 to be possibly the biggest of the year from there. So, before we move on to the next one, what you want to say, Aaron?
I just wanted to say that Roman Reigns turning face, definitely a major positive for the overall history of the Bloodline. That's a very significant moment. That has to be weighed in too. Great return at SummerSlam. And like you said, it's all setting up year 5. Year 5 could potentially be the biggest year of the Bloodline ever, with Roman Reigns now as a full-fledged babyface, The Rock coming back. What's going to happen with that? Usos possibly getting back together, the original Bloodline, like what are they going to do at War Games? There's a lot to look forward to, and we may have to revisit this list down the line, seeing what happens next. Sure. According to Paul Heyman, we may still only be in like the 3rd inning of this whole thing. It's crazy.
I can say it. Like I say, it was a fun year with some high greats and lows. I just wish that they would have, as far as just getting from place to place, I just wish they would have made it more compelling. That's it. But when we get to 2024 onward, like, yeah, man, that stuff was good.
Yeah, definitely.
All right. And so we move on to